everybody is really keeping a very keen eye on the movement in that crucial legislation and whether this is going to be passed in the winter session or not. We've got a very special panel to discuss all of that and a lot more right here on Business Tonight. Rajeev Chandrashekhar MP in the Rajya Sabha, along with Adi Godrej, Chairman of Godrej Industries, and of course Kiran the Chair and MD at Biocon, to discuss the expectations from the Parliament session. Thanks very much, gentlemen and Ms. Shaw, for being with us. Let me just begin with you, Mr. Godrej. What are your expectations from this winter session, especially after the monsoon washout? There's been a Bihar verdict that seems to have sharpened the rhetoric, at least politically speaking. The opposition, of course, is galvanized. Do you honestly expect work to happen? And do you also believe that a spirited opposition is perhaps going to be met with a more conciliatory government than in the past?
Well, I expect that after what we saw in the earlier session, I hope both the government and the opposition will see to it that this is a productive session. And the most important, of course, legislation that needs to be passed is the constitutional amendment for the GST, because I think that will make a huge difference to India's GDP growth if implemented.
Right. Ms. Shaw, how hopeful are you that this session will be productive? We saw the Prime Minister himself strike a bit of a conciliatory note in his address this morning. But given the political climate that we're seeing in the country right now, are you hopeful that we will see business getting done in this session?
I think I'm very optimistic this time, because I find that both sides have really taken a decision to basically work towards implementing GST. That's a very good sign, and I'm very hopeful, given the kind of signals we are getting from both sides, that it will happen.
Rajeev, comment on that. Corporate India seems to be far more optimistic than one expected them to be, given given what we saw in the last session, which was a complete washout. You have a better pulse of what's going on because you're a member of the Rajya Sabha. How hopeful are you of business getting done in this session?
Yes, I'm actually much more hopeful that both the government will be a lot more pragmatic towards engaging with the opposition, and so will the opposition be, I think, in trying to engage with the government and arriving at some sort of consensus on some of the outstanding issues, especially like the GST bill, etc.
Ms. Shaw, you rightly pointed out that both sides seem to be making at least the right noises to begin with, but do you expect a middle ground that can be reached on this very crucial legislation in this session alone?
I think if you look at the kind of conditions that Congress have made, I think with very little dialogue, I'm sure both sides can reach agreement, and that is what I think will happen, because the three conditions that Congress have made, Finance Minister has already indicated that he's willing to basically get into a dialogue, and I'm sure that they will find and reach agreement.
All right, let's talk about dialogue and let's talk about conciliation, because Rajeev, Congress says that the FM has taken a very confrontational view by calling the GST suggestions preposterous and also saying that a half-baked or a flawed architecture in the GST should not go through. Is the government not open to any compromise on the GST? Is that something that you're picking up within the walls of Parliament as well?
No, I think, we should go with what the Prime Minister said. I think the Prime Minister is saying that the government wants to engage with the opposition. The Finance Minister may have been misquoted or taken out of context. From what I have understood from meeting the Finance Minister today, he is definitely interested in engaging with the opposition and coming to a middle ground. He, of course, believes, like most of us do, that hard coding the number of the revenue neutral rate into the Constitution is really not a good practice. You can't be putting in tax rates into the Constitution, and there must be some other way of giving the Congress and the opposition the comfort that they seek on the ceiling on the GST.
Right, the cap on GST is something that the government is unlikely to compromise on. That's the initial view from Rajeev Chandrashekhar. Mr. Godrej, what's your sense? Do you expect some sort of a middle ground to be reached, given the fact that now it's down to 3 points in which there's a difference of opinion between the BJP and the Congress?
Yes, I think so. I think both need to be conciliatory. Neither should take extreme positions. And even if the GST bill is not optimal or not a perfect GST constitutional amendment, I think we can live with it. But putting a GST into action is extremely important.
Kiran Mazumdar, do you agree with the point there made by Mr. Godrej that we should live with an imperfect GST to start with, that we should make these small compromises if need be just to get on with it, that we've been procrastinating about GST for years now, so it's okay to start with an imperfect one as long as we move to a perfect one. Would you agree with that opinion?
See, this is the first time we are actually, getting GST delivered. And I think we should start with whatever is optimally best, but I don't think we need to start with the perfect GST policy. I think we should start with whatever we think is best. But please remember, GST is a very, very important piece of the economic reforms and of for economic growth. So I think both sides have to work in the best interests of the economy. And I'm very confident that this time around both parties will reach a common ground.
All right, let's keep the big picture at bay for a while and get down to specifics, Mr. Godrej. Then the Congress wants that 1% additional cascading levy to go away, and the government, at least what we're picking up right now in New Delhi, seems to be a lot more open to that suggestion than many others that are being made. How important, from a corporate point of view, is to remove that additional levy?
It's important, and it will be a good thing if it is removed.
Ms. Shaw, you want to come in on that? The 1% additional levy, it was a contentious issue even with India Inc. How crucial is it that this cascading levy should be taken away? Because the government seems a lot more open to abolishing that than most other things.
At the end of the day, I think we have to do what is important for spurring economic revival and economic growth. So I think whatever decision is taken, I'm sure will be taken in the interests of ensuring that this happens.
Mm-hmm. Right, Rajeev, both Mr. Godrej and Ms. Shaw are a little, cautious on that. What's your view? Because it's clear that the corporate India will obviously not want the additional levy. Do you think that the government will budge on this 1% additional levy? Don't you think it's distortionary?
And Sandeep, I've gone on record as saying that 1% is a cascading, it's really distortionary in many ways. And so I think most people accept that. It has been a request put forth by some states like Gujarat and Tamil Nadu. And I think it's a question of the government then going back to these states and saying, look, we have to give this up. And it does not materially alter what the GST is going to do for those states, given the fact that there is going to be a revenue compensation mechanism built into the GST anyway. So there are ways of getting around this if there is goodwill and there is good faith on part of both the opposition and the government.
All right, Mr. Godrej, the other big bone of contention is, of course, a cap on GST rate. Is that possible? Because there could be emergencies and a constitutional amendment may not be possible each time. And what is the GST rate that corporate India will be comfortable with?
I think everybody is now more or less agreed that an 18% rate is a reasonable one. I think putting a cap in the constitutional amendment itself may not be a good idea. But however, if some political party insists on it, it's not very damaging either. Of course, that cap need not be the level at which you want to implement. So, for example, if it is agreed that the best level to start implementing at is 18%, you could put a cap at 20 or 21%. But it will be much better if the numbers, the caps, etc., are not in the constitutional amendment bill.
All right, Mr. Godrej believes the number cannot be put in the constitutional amendment bill. There should be a notional cap. Ms. Shaw, you have a view on this one because the Congress party wants it, and some people also believe that there should be a cap because it cannot be counterproductive. It should not lead to inflationary impact at a later stage. And what rate should you be comfortable with? 18, 20, over that?
Obviously, I think below 20% is ideal because I think you also need to make sure that you spur consumption. So you don't want GST to be so high that it does not really spur consumption. And at the same time, you don't want it to be so low that there is not enough resource collection in terms of GST to actually invest in other more important sectors that the government needs to. So I think you need to strike a balance, and I'm very confident that the finance minister, in consultation of course with other parties, will definitely arrive at this optimal level, this balance of GST, which I think will be below 20%.
Levels of below 20%, and you certainly wish that policymakers and opposition is listening to this. But Mr. Godrej, how big a setback would it really be if the GST does not really go to the winter session? I mean, that's a possibility as well. And you know, the other question really is, are merits of GST overstated, do you think?
First of all, I think it will be quite negative if the GST does not go through in this session. This is quite a long session, and GST is extremely important. And to my mind, the benefits of GST will be tremendous. It will put India into a double-digit GDP growth rate, and I think it will add 2 percentage points to our GDP growth, other things being equal. So I think it's a very important legislation. It's sort of a once-in-a-decade kind of reform.
Kiran, shall you agree with that it's a once-in-a-decade kind of a reform, and not getting it through is going to be very damaging, and that by hook or crook we need to have the GST through in this session of Parliament? What kind of an impact do you see having if the GST were not to be through in the winter session?
I think all parties are aware of the importance of passing GST this time. And I'm very confident that we don't even have to hypothesize on whether it will happen or not. I'm very confident it will happen. And I think all parties are very seized of the matter. They know how important it is for economic revival. And I'm sure they will act in a mature and responsible way. So I'm sure that the GST bill will be passed.
Okay, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw and Mr. Adi Godrej, both Mr. Shaw and Mr. Godrej, are hopeful that it will get done no matter what. Rajeev, let you have the last word of the debate then. How big a setback is it going to be if the GST does not go through in the winter session? Now, merits of GST in some ways overstated. What signal will this send to foreign investors if the GST does not go through?
No, it is very important. It is very important not just for economic reforms and for investors and the markets. It's important for the political class as a whole to show to the country that we can come together when it comes to something that is good for the country. And the GST is something that really creates one open Indian market, which is something that we need to encourage entrepreneurship and small businesses in this country. So I believe it is very, very critical that this session we pass the GST, and I am very confident and hopeful that it will be passed in the session.
All right, we live in hope. Let's hope that this winter session is one of hope and not of despair. Rajeev, Chandrashekhar, Kiran Mazumdar, Adi Godrej, thank you so much for sparing the time and joining us this evening on Business Tonight.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.